Director of DRR or Mercy Corps, she co-led creation and development of the Toward Resilience guide and was the subject matter expert for the companion e-learning course entitled Toward Resilience, Principles in Practice. And it's my pleasure to introduce Anne, and Anne, I'll let you introduce our other speakers.
Okay, thanks, Bob. And we are delighted today that one of the few people that was able to get in is one of the authors of the Toward Resilience Guide. So at the very end, you'll see some resources, and if you're not aware of this guide, there's a link there that you can download it. So I am glad that you all were able to make it. I know all the people in our world are really excited and looking forward to Sendai, which is starting in just a couple of days. So it's a especially busy time for people involved in disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation. I just want to give you a little bit of background of what we're doing here today. After the Toward Resilience Guide that author Amy Hilleboe and Marlies Turnbull and Charlotte Sterrett wrote, they wrote this in conjunction with the Emergency Capacity Building Project, which was a collaboration with 6 big INGOs. And we worked on this guide together and came up with these 10 principles in some long workshops with practitioners from all over the world. And the principles themselves seem to have validity beyond DRR, but really, if they guide our programming, it allows you to cover most of your bases and to really come up with things that are sustainable and useful. So there was so much interest in Toward Resilience, and it was downloaded so many times that Disaster Ready Initiative approached us and about developing an e-learning, and I ended up kind of leading that, and from that we are coming up with this, the case studies and the presentation today. Many people have already registered for that e-learning, and if any of you haven't or are in the middle of it, we encourage you to do it. There are 3 case studies in that e-learning that are really go into depth with some of the principles, and those are from Madagascar, Niger, and Indonesia. So the 10 principles that both Ilan and Nikki are going to mention in their presentation today, if there's a link in the chat box that you could go to these, but also if you look up in the presentation box, the right-hand tab is a link to these 10 principles. They are things like recognizing who has the responsibility and the rights. That's number 3. Number 4 is participation of the communities at risk. 1 and 2 are about understanding the context, the hazard context, and things like that. But I'm not going to take more time since we started late to go into these principles, but both Ilan and Nikki will be referring to them, and if you have any questions, you can click on that tab and see them for yourself. So let me move right on to introducing our speakers. The first one we have is Nikki Antoinette M. DeVera, who comes to us from the Center for Disaster Preparedness Foundation in the Philippines. She is the program head for training and capacity development. Nikki is a former community organizer and a volunteer for people in Central Luzon Island, and she served as the community development facilitator for the municipality of Mercedes, which is the one she will talk about today. Immediately following her, without any interruption from me, we will hear from Dr. Ilan Kelman, who is a professor at the Institute for Risk and Disaster Reduction and the Institute for Global Health at University College London. He has a PhD from the University of Cambridge, and he wrote his dissertation on flood vulnerability, which he's going to talk about today. Dr. Kelman is widely published. You can Google him, and there'll be some links at the end and see all the many things, contributions he's made to disaster. So, Nikki, let me turn the time over to you. I am hearing some other noise, so I'm not sure what it is, but I will mute myself. And Nikki, I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
Yes, greetings everyone. I'm Nikki Antoinette DeVera. of the Center for Disaster Preparedness Foundation Incorporated, or CDP. And I'll be talking about collaborative governance and integrating DRR and CCA in local government and livelihood security for this webinar. To discuss CDP briefly, we are a non-government organization based in the Philippines, established in 1999. We are a regional resource center focused on community-based disaster risk reduction and management. And CDP has been working for the integration of DRR and CCA in its various projects, training, research, and advocacy. CDP is one of the 4 civil society organizations that's part of the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, or the NDRC. It's a working group of various government, non-government, civil sector, and private sector organizations in the Philippines. And this council is responsible for ensuring the protection and welfare of the people before, during, and after disasters. You'll see CDP at the bottom part with a yellow circle. To give an overview of the Philippine governing bodies, I have here a simple illustration of how the hierarchy goes. So first is the national government, then the regional government, and then the municipal, the provincial government, and then the municipal government or the city government, and the barangay or the community level. You'll see here that I'll be discussing about Mercedes, which is on the municipal level. Unfortunately, I don't have time to discuss Banaba, which is in the barangay level. But anyway, I can entertain questions later on after the presentations. All the levels below the national government follow national policies, though each level has its own governing powers. The case study that CDP has prepared is on the municipal and barangay level. I'll be talking a bit about some national laws for DRRM and CCA first, then focus on concrete examples on how the 10 principles for integrating DRR and CCA are being applied and practiced on the ground. We'll be tackling how people from the government and the communities work together to achieve a more resilient future. So most of the examples I'll be citing will be from the municipal to the barangay, specifically for the municipality of Mercedes. Okay. And what you see now in the screen are 3 significant national laws that the Philippines has. The first one here, it's the Philippine DRRM Act of 2010. It is an act strengthening the Philippine DRRM system, providing for the national DRRM framework and plan, funds appropriation and formation of DRRM councils and committees in all levels of the government. The second one, all right, actually these are 2 laws. The next 2 laws complementing each other for climate change adaptation are the Climate Change Act of 2009 and the establishment of the People Survival Fund. These are for mainstreaming climate change into government policy formulation, in creating the Climate Change Commission, or the CCC, and funding for climate change adaptation projects. These laws serve as the main policies for DRRM and CCA in the Philippines, though they are made separately, making the integration of their implementing rules and regulations a challenge. A multi-stakeholder and multi-level approach has been adopted by DRR CCA actors in the Philippines to address the issue. So what I'm showing you now is to just quote the first law showing the basis that adapts community-based disaster risk reduction and management into the Philippine context, which gives better room for the 10 principles to be applied. It focuses on 3 major points. First is the bottom-up and participatory disaster risk reduction. You'll see that there are training and risk assessments with the people, planning and strengthening DRR organizations and structures. Second, this legal basis also is for reiterating that disasters are mainly a reflection and product of the country population's vulnerability. And third, it's a comprehensive approach integrating social and human development to reduce disaster risks. So for the benefit of everyone, I'll be repeating some terms. on how the major actors of this case study are addressed to help you through the presentation. So first is the MDRRMC. So sorry, here. I'm pointing it right now, the MDRRMC. It stands for the Municipal Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council. Then the BDRMC, or the Barangay Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Committee. Then CSOs, or civil society organizations, and people's organizations. So CSOs and POs. You'll find me saying MDRIMCs or BDRIMCs, CSOs and POs, as we commonly call them in the Philippines, and to save time. So the case study is about the municipality of Mercedes, where the local government authorities, national agencies, and CSOs, or the MDRMC, play an active role in mainstreaming DRR CCA into the municipality up to the household level. The case study also features practices on livelihood security. So to give you an idea about it, Mercedes is a second-class municipality located in the province of Camarines Norte. Part of this is Camarines Norte, in the Bicol region, or Region 5 of the Philippines. It is categorized as a rural municipality. So you'll see here in the red line, it is the municipality of Mercedes. It has a population of 47,674 in the 2010 census, with 26 barangays, 3 of which are small islands. So here are the small islands you can see here. Its main livelihood resources are fisheries, agriculture for rice and vegetable farming, and other services. So given the geographic location, see, I'm pointing here, all the areas in Mercedes. Given its geographic location, Mercedes is prone to different types of hazards, especially tsunami, storm surge, typhoon, flood, earthquake, and landslide. It was actually included in the first few predictions of Typhoon Haiyan's path before it changed course to the central Philippines. So there. Mercedes is a second-class municipality located in the province of Camarines Norte, and it's actually regarded as the fishing bowl of the province. It experienced its last major disaster in the 1994 typhoon named Ring. Major damages brought about by the typhoon covered all the 26 barangays, leaving the town flat and livelihoods disrupted, especially the fisher folks. During the 2011 earthquake in Japan, the town had a preemptive evacuation among the communities located in the downtown area, and the reality of having an ocean as a major source of living has made it clear that it can also be a major threat to the people. Okay, and now we'll see. Okay, now what I'm showing you here, in September 2013, through a project called the Sustainable and Resilient Agribusiness Development in Mercedes, or SARAM project, funded by ADRA, where CDP was a partner for DRR CCA, members of the local government and CSOs in Mercedes, together with the provincial line agencies, attended the training of trainers for community-based disaster risk reduction and management. So this part, you'll see that these are the municipal DRM council members. So they're the ones here in the picture. So they had a training. The participants consist of personnel from almost all the offices inside the municipal government, including the vice mayor, the municipal councilors, plus several line agencies like the police, the army, the firemen, the Coast Guard, and the Philippine Red Cross. The training gave everyone the chance to appreciate CBDRM from a point of view of active actors. Learning how the Philippine DRM law is implemented up to the local level was a crucial turning point for most of the participants. After understanding the law, they were now ready to forego their passive attitude during disasters. We can see that at this point, principles for integrating DRR CCA, principles 1, 2, and 3, were done or observed in Mercedes. Leaders and authorities from the government, including CSOs, joined hands together to have a common understanding of DRR and CCA as duty bearers. The MDRMC teams crafted a CBDRF training. It's a module specifically for the municipality, and divided the barangays using a cluster approach. So they clustered all the barangays into islands, upland, lowland, and downtown. And because the project can only cover 18 barangays, the municipal government made its own commitment to sponsor the remaining 8. So from the municipal dream team, they went down to the barangay to train the 26 barangay DRRM committee. And these committees are leaders, community leaders who are part also of the local government, including CSOs. So they were trained, so the municipal Dream C trained the barangay. And afterwards, the B Dream Cs were then tasked to train the population of the whole barangay. So we're moving from here to here. So these are the trainers, and they train the barangay, and then they're now training all the households. The requirement was to have at least one member of the household to attend the trainings to ensure that knowledge is passed on in the family level. Though barangays have smaller funds on their own, they made their own counterpart, including funds, manpower, and logistics. So you can see here trainings in different levels, making sure that it reaches household level with the use of project and public funds. These covers principles 4, 5, and 6, which is strengthening the participation of and action by the population at risk, promoting systemic engagement and trainings, and fostering synergy between multiple levels. I'll be showing you some photos of the training. So what you see here is the what we call the social Venn diagram. Some are shaped like a fish. This is an example of a barangay in the middle, and these are organizations helping them before, during, and after disaster. Here's a participatory 3D map that was made by one of PDB's friends, Dr. J.C. Geyer. It was used during the hazard mapping of the community. And you can see here, this is what we call the MDC. So this person is one of the members of the council, giving some points and giving some lectures during the training. All the training outputs were then collected by the MDMC to consolidate and make sure that risk assessment results are truly participatory and to make DRR and CCA plans realistic and not just for compliance purposes. These plans were later made into local DRM plans, early warning systems, and contingency plans. And you'll see that knowledge exchange was really evident on multi-levels. I'll be showing you some similar pictures. So here we have a B Dream C member. So he's a leader from the community. He's also a person with disability, but he's also joining the trainings very actively. There's a picture of some senior citizens or the elderly joining the trainings too, and of course women. We also have pictures with children, but unfortunately I wasn't able to put it here. And to ensure the application of science, their early warning systems were given to the national agencies for climate and volcanology for validation. So this falls under principle number 4 and 7, which is drawing on and building diverse knowledge, diverse sources of knowledge. Now, so what we see here is it's a meeting within the MDREAM-C for typhoon monitoring. Well, to give a context on this picture, the threat of Typhoon Haiyan was their first test to put their knowledge into practice. Though they were spared by Typhoon Haiyan, another typhoon named Glenda directly hit the province in 2014. This photo here shows the MDREAM-C meeting 3 days before the typhoon hit landfall in Mercedes. And they practiced preemptive evacuation, prepositioning of relief goods, and increased public awareness. So this experience, they actually had a zero casualty experience. It was very remarkable actually because people evacuated on their own. They many people did not ask for rescuers because they know what to do. And now, reaching one of the major parts of this presentation is about the municipal code. So, in terms of governance, to gather their experiences, Mercedes, through the local council, is now in the process of making a municipal code for DRR CCA. So this is a high-level policy. They gathered all their existing laws from agriculture, fisheries, social welfare, transportation, engineering, and etc. The code also benefits from the results of the risk assessment from the community training. This code in itself, so I'm pointing here now, it is actually intended to withstand changes in political leadership due to local elections. So local elections in the Philippines happen every 3 years. So you can imagine the change of personalities and people that you have to deal with in the government every 3 years. So instead of just drafting policies like resolutions or ordinances that can be junked by different elected political figures, the municipal code is a standing guideline that can be used and updated through the years by the municipality. So it is quite powerful and at the same time puts regard on climate change adaptation. They know that there will be adverse changes in the future, and this is their way of answering through policy level. In this code, they will be institutionalizing the conduct of trainings on community levels on an annual basis with or without the help of NGO. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is governance for DRR's work. DRR and CCA. This falls under principles 8 and 9, instill flexibility and responsiveness, and address different time scales. And then for the last 2 slides, this is very interesting actually. The last 2 slides for Mercedes is an example of how fisher folks plan to save their livelihood against disasters. These are floating fish cages. So you see here, I'm pointing into the bamboo structures here, and these are the fisher folks. These are floating fish cages. This way, the fisher folks need not to go to the open sea to do fishing. So these are like around 1 to 2 kilometers away from the shoreline. And after brainstorming with fisher folks, it was deemed that fish evacuation could be done by taking the fish from the cages and be taken back to the mainland before a typhoon hits the coast. So literally, people or fisher folks here in Mercedes did an evacuation drill for their livelihood. So it's not just the people that they're evacuating, not just their family, not just their belongings, but of course they also did a evacuation for livelihood. Let me just show you another picture. So this is first one, and the second one here. This is a picture of fisher folks literally evacuating their fish during the simulation drill for typhoon. It was found that they could transfer their fish from the sea to safer fish ponds in the mainland in just 15 to 20 minutes. Many people, including the national government, were actually pretty amazed about the experience. So, and for the last principle, do no harm. Even in the beginning, when the municipal and barangay government gave counterparts for the activity, we knew that they understood our explanation that NGOs will not be around in their area forever. They knew that they have to stand on their own. And those counterparts were not just financial, much of it are human resource and logistics. We also made sure that weather observations for early warning systems such as livelihood evacuation are widely based on scientific information combined with accepted indigenous knowledge, local knowledge in the area. And lastly, I am happy to inform everyone that the story of Mercedes is also brought to the UN World Conference in DRR in Sendai, Japan through GNDR, AFL, Oxfam, and of course CDC. And that's it for me. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be happy to answer your questions later.
This is one of the first times I've ever heard about livelihood and fish evacuation drills, so that was very interesting. I just want to remind people if they have questions for Nikki and next for Ilan to put those in the chat box so that at the end we can go over them. And turning the time over to Ilan.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and for everyone to participate. I'm going to be looking at structural approaches for floods, so combining these 2 processes that we're talking about. And I found what was particularly powerful in Nikki's presentation was how much control the communities are taking in conjunction with other people throughout the country. And there was absolutely no assumption, no reliance that big structures or engineered structures needed to be used. What does that mean in the context of climate change? Well, we're aware that what is going to happen is that climate change will warm the air. A warmer air can hold more water, which means that the water cycle speeds up, and that will lead to more rain. With more rain, there will be more floods because the water has to go somewhere after it falls. But look at the emphasis in the third bullet point there. Just because there are more floods, that does not mean that we have to have more flood disasters. That happens because disaster risk is always a combination of hazard and vulnerability. In this case, the hazard is a flood, and vulnerability is the same for all hazards. It's people and society potentially being harmed. That can be deaths, injuries, business interruption, livelihoods being disrupted, psychological issues. Within this, climate change is affecting that first bullet. That's creating a warmer atmosphere. It means that there's a hazard driver. Climate change is simply affecting or changing the hazards. Yet, what's happening to the vulnerability? Well, climate change is not really affecting that. So we have the control over the vulnerability. Whereas climate change as a hazard driver can make the hazard worse, or it could make some floods less problematic, we need to know more about the vulnerability. And this leads to two specific principles that we've heard about. Principle number one, increasing understanding of the hazard and climate change context, but also principle two, to increase understanding of exposure, vulnerability, and capacity. This increased understanding also shows us that irrespective of climate change, we can control the vulnerability. And one way which we have been trying to control both hazards and vulnerability is through structural approaches. These structural approaches include dams, levees, walls, barriers, and barrages. All of these structures, many of them engineered, look and feel safe. And we are well aware that they alter the hazard, reducing floods which are within the design parameters. But because they look and feel safe, we then say, okay, well then we don't have to worry about floods, so why should we prepare? Why should we mitigate possible damage? Why should we reduce flood risk? As soon as we make that decision, that increases our vulnerability over the long term. Again, risk is a combination of hazard and vulnerability. So even if the hazard reduces, the vulnerability can increase. And that means that risk can increase over the long term. So this phrase, risk transference, is about risk being transferred from the present to the future through using structural approaches. Very good examples where I live at the moment in London, where in the early 1980s, they opened up a big barrier across the Thames downstream from the city. That led to a building boom, so the entire financial district is now behind the barrier. That means that there's a lot more assets to be flooded. So we all know that eventually a flood occurs outside the structure's design parameters, or it may be that lack of maintenance has reduced the structure's effectiveness. As soon as that happens, the barrier gets overtopped and the infrastructure gets flooded, causing a lot of damage and disruption. That infrastructure would not have existed without the barrier on the Thames. So in fact, the barrier has increased the vulnerability even while reducing hazard, which means that flood risk increases because of the barrier. That leads directly to two other principles. Principle number 9 is addressing different timescales. Risk transference reduces risk in the present, but transfers it to the future. That is not resilient. Instead, we need to consider all timescales. And similarly, principle 10 is do no harm. It's relying on only structural approaches, in fact, does harm by increasing risk. But we cannot get away from the fact that these structures do look and feel safe. So how do we convince people to seek a balance of approaches for floods without rejecting all structures because they do have merits? Well, one program which I co-coordinate is called Many Strong Voices, which explores such topics. We work with peoples in the Arctic and also the small island developing states, the small tropical islands, to meet challenges of climate change. but recognizing that climate change is only one challenge which communities face. Many Strong Voices covers all of the principles, addressing different timescales, increasing understanding, as well as those which I will consider later, such as participation of the population and systematic engagement of risk issues, which Nikki covered very well. One example comes from the British Virgin Islands in the Caribbean. Here we see a beach house was built on a low-lying beach. Things did not go well during a storm. So rather than considering whether or not an artificial beach is really a good idea in a location which experienced storms, they responded by constructing a beach and making an entirely engineered shoreline, meaning that this house could be rebuilt. That is unfortunate, because on a small island, engineering part of a coastline creates major changes in the currents, in the sedimentation, and the wave patterns. That can take sediment from other places and therefore cause erosion along the coastline. In the meantime, another storm is going to come along. If there is no damage, the owners of this house will be confident. They will not take precautionary measures. Risk transference occurs as vulnerability goes up. But if there is little damage, then perhaps not much is being gained. Because no matter what happens, engineering the beach and the coastline entirely becomes a lose-lose proposition for disaster risk reduction, including a lose-lose proposition for adapting to rising seas under climate change. Again, Principle 10, do no harm, is being violated by the assumption that we can engineer the coastline and therefore fully control nature. Similarly, we can bounce out to the Pacific, to the country of Tonga. Here is an example of an attempt to use a wall to defend part of the main island from eroding. On the landward side, we see standing water. It might be coming up from the ground. It might be after rain. It might be a combination of both of them. Simply the land is saturated and the water cannot drain. Whatever the cause, it is showing that relying on only structural approaches does not always present flooding or flood damage. In any case, trying to maintain a wall such as this takes money and it takes skill. That means that resources have to be available, especially after a powerful storm or earthquake or tsunami. And Tonga experiences all of those. So this approach of assuming that this wall can do everything and help protect that part of the island from flooding is simply not going to happen. But it is not all bad news, and we need to learn from good practice as well as less successful approaches. So we'll stay in the Pacific with the country of Samoa. And there's potentially a good practice example here in terms of focusing on vulnerability reduction. That is through tackling root causes, recognizing that climate change drives some hazards, but not all hazards. So a paper by Michelle Daly and colleagues describes how they initiated local participatory development activities by combining local and external knowledge in coastal villages to address climate-related hazards. That covers climate change, that covers wider coastal management, including sea level rise. Samoa has a wide variety of coastal situations, including what we can see in the photo, with buildings constructed right into the ocean. So the process was to take district meetings, which integrated local perspectives from several villages, and then scaling that up into wider meetings to ensure that all concerns, all local concerns were considered, but not at the expense of places in other parts of the island. That led to a national coastal vulnerability reduction strategy, building up from small scale to large scale, and considering structural approaches in some cases but not in others, and never relying on them only. As well, this process involved training local and national staff in participatory methods so they could continue after this specific project had ended. And time will tell how successful the endeavor has been. So we see Principle 4, strengthening participation of the population at risk, including action by the population at risk. We also see Principle 5, promoting systemic engagement and change, and Principle 6, fostering synergy between multiple levels. That also applies to 2 other tropical island states. And this was work done by Jessica Mercer and colleagues, including me. So Jessica went to Papua New Guinea and Timor-Leste and worked with locals there as well as national government people to show how no single knowledge form can ever be perfect for disaster risk reduction or climate change adaptation. Instead, everyone who are inside the community, who are outside the community, has plenty of knowledge and ideas to contribute, plenty to learn, and plenty to teach. So the 2 types of knowledge which are given on the screen are not well defined, and they are not mutually exclusive. In fact, those inside and outside of the community can contribute to both. A specific example, many island and coastal communities often respond to higher tides and wave-related flooding by improvising a wall. They experience something outside of their knowledge, so building a protective structure seems to be most logical. But even knowing simple wave physics shows that a solid wall reflects the wave with high energy, so sediment can no longer be dropped and the beach erosion increases. That is part of the hidden cost of relying on structural defenses. Yet this science says nothing about the local context that only local people know. This could be localized wind direction or crops which can survive floods or droughts. So we must sit down, exchange knowledge forms, and recognize what they both can and cannot achieve, which is exactly what Principle 7 states. This has happened in the Seychelles. The government took control of a problematic area on the main island where erosion was threatening the main node. Consulting with the local people, nearby businesses, and external experts, they came up with what you see in the photo. Multiple approaches, not creating a straight engineered coastline, but all working together in combination to reduce wave and current energy, promoting sedimentation, preventing erosion, and creating a beautiful park for a picnic. That also includes locals monitoring and reporting any problems. In response to the question, I'll clarify that CCA stands for Climate Change Adaptation. DRR is Disaster Risk Reduction. So when we look at what happens in the Seychelles, which takes into account climate change and is really about disaster risk reduction, that covers a couple of principles such as recognizing rights and responsibilities, that's Principle 3, and also instilling flexibility and responsiveness. Now, what I've really presented is sort of a collection of individual case studies based on Many Strong Voices work, which is trying to bring them together to learn, apply, and transfer lessons. But I'm also involved in another international network, MAHB, which stands for Millennium Alliance for Humanity in the Biosphere. It is pronounced MOB, as in a mob of people working towards sustainability. And using mainly island case studies, we are using climate change as a starting point, but recognizing that we must go beyond climate change. In fact, if we consider the guiding principles together, we notice so much about understanding, connecting, and participating. Climate change and climate change adaptation cannot be separated from other sustainability challenges. It is not its own section. Instead, it is part of wider sustainability processes to be enacted through the 10 principles. And there is really nothing new in terms of what climate change adaptation brings to the debate. It is about flood risk reduction. It is about coastal management. It balances structural and non-structural approaches, and many other activities which must be done irrespective of climate change. In fact, the easiest is to recognize that climate change adaptation is no different from disaster risk reduction, except that disaster risk reduction goes beyond climate change to encompass all hazards, just as Samoa showed us. Indeed, climate change adaptation becomes a subset of disaster risk reduction. There is no point in building a wall to deal with sea level rise if it will fall down in the next earthquake, which could be what Tonga experiences. Yet disaster risk reduction is not everything. As shown by the example from Seychelles, We need to combine recreation and community spirit with disaster risk reduction, including climate change adaptation, so that people who use a location can feel ownership, look out for any repairs which need to be done, and themselves support the resilience principles. That is, disaster risk reduction sits within development and sustainability. If we do not adopt the approach shown on the screen, we might successfully adapt to climate change while increasing disaster risk. Or we might implement disaster risk reduction without involving the community and without them caring. That simply does not support the 10 resilience principles. So please join us in learning from others and from ourselves to ensure that we do not get fixated on structural approaches, but use them when appropriate, that we do not get fixated on climate change adaptation, but that we do not forget it, but instead include everyone and everyone's knowledge, which is in fact the many strong voices collectively, to move towards resilience through disaster risk reduction, including climate change adaptation. Thank you very much.
That was wonderful and such great pictures to illustrate your point. To both of the presentation, presenters, we have a question. Ilan, at the very end, you gave an example of using both local knowledge and scientific knowledge. And I'm wondering, Nikki, if you have an example where that has happened, and Ilan, and both of you, can you talk about how that specifically benefits a community to combine both of those, or even an exact example of where that has happened? And where I'm coming from on that question is that there's always a lot of conversation about using Indigenous knowledge and combining both, but I haven't seen too many examples or had people explain how that has benefited. So that's where we're going with that question. I wonder, Nikki, if you have an example, or Ilan, either one of you?
Yes, I see Nikki is still muted, so I'll jump in and give an example, which is actually supporting exactly what Nikki said in the Philippines, that some colleagues have used a technique called participatory three-dimensional mapping. And that simply means going into a community, using cheap local materials like cardboard, paper, string, and getting the community to build a three-dimensional model of their location with those materials. They then label the hazards and the vulnerabilities. External scientists will support that and get involved, which means that the local knowledge appears on the map, and so does external knowledge. That gives ownership to the community of their own map and their own vulnerabilities, and will directly identify in collaboration what could be done to reduce vulnerability. So all knowledges are combined to build up this three-dimensional model, and then actions are developed and people can move forward with them. Nikki, do you want
to answer? Yes. Well, to answer that question about how we can further engage people from the community for DRR and CCA, since I wasn't able to present a case study about Barangay Banaba, but I'd like to cite because we also have a video about their flood simulation. This community that I'm talking about is it's an urban area where it was greatly affected by Typhoon in 2009. So one of the biggest factors to have community participation is through community organizing, which is part of the community-based disaster risk reduction and management approach. So community organizing does not do activities with like sweeping meetings or one-time engagement. It's a long and painstaking process that we do in the Philippines. And I think that it's also done in other countries as well. But going back to community organizing, it plays a big role on knowing the pulse of the people from one house to another. Another thing is also, of course, I've stated it in my first case study about a series of trainings. This is also very helpful. especially if the trainings are on the level of the community's understanding, while also giving specific knowledge about science and new ways of doing adaptation at the local level.
Okay, thank you so much to Chin Nobleza for that question. Very interesting. How long did the community process and the eventual buy-in of these communities take for DRR and CCA? What were the most challenging factors? In the examples that I presented, it was very contextual. And in fact, I would say that in many instances, do we have full community buy-in? We don't really know, because no community is homogeneous. There's no community where everyone has the same opinion. And a lot of it is simply recognizing that it's a continuing, dynamic process whereby people need to talk, they need to experience, they need to engage, and look for a decision-making process where it may be not everyone agrees with the decision, but at least everyone agrees with the process. My experience from Seychelles was that the buy-in was very quick and the community very much accepted it. With Samoa, there was a lot of discussion and a lot of going back and forth to ensure not only that the leaders of the communities accepted what the people were going to do, but also that the leaders did not exclude certain sectors of the community who were often left out. So I think this is a question which has to be asked in the beginning and continue throughout the process, recognizing that not all the time will everyone be involved or buy into it, but as long as people accept the process, that in itself can bring the community together and ensure that climate change adaptation, which is part of disaster risk reduction, is included.
Even I agree with him. Thank you, Ms. Chin Nobleza, for that question. To answer that, yes, the process is actually, it's a continuing process. You can't say that it's a year or 2 months. You know, for the case study that I presented, we had an engagement with, of course, the local government. It took us almost half a year to up to a year to really get in or have a good relation with them. Though it wasn't that hard because, you know, rural areas here in the Philippines do get help less compared to other areas, especially in Metro Manila. And I think one of the most challenging factors we encountered at times were, of course, one is budget, but then again, the thing of how we do this, or I mean, how we take this trainings that the people from the government take it down to the community. It's not sort of a barrier, but it's a challenge because, you know, people from the government tend to look into what they're doing. They have lots of things to do aside from DRR and CCA. So those things are very challenging. And having them do the work on the ground also was a great challenge for us. But nevertheless, it was overcome. And yes, we did a lot of community organizing in the process.
Let me pose another couple of questions, and unless anything comes into the chat box. Nikki, I know you just mentioned this, but I wonder if you can mention any additional things that you did to motivate, you and CDP did to motivate the community to participate in simulations. I know that sometimes that can be a challenge to get people to really take that seriously. And Ilan, I wondered if you could share any examples, you know, where structural approaches like levees, dams, seawalls, the things that you were mentioning, have been successfully combined with community preparedness, and so overall they have reduced vulnerability. Okay, so Nikki, why don't you take it away, and then followed by Ilan, and then we will probably be wrapping up unless there, oh, I see another question. So
yes. Okay, so I'll answer and question first, and I'll later answer Mr. Dubravka's question. For yes, for involving the community in such a simulation, especially for one of our previous case study, Barangay Banila, which I wasn't able to present, it wasn't that hard because they experienced a really devastating flood in 2009. So after at least, let's see, 2 years, we were able to engage the people, and we asked them to involve at least one person from the household, because it's really hard, like what Anne said, it's really hard to involve everybody in the household, especially if they have their livelihood and stuff. But then again, experience of the people is a great driver to have them participate fully into the simulations, especially flood simulations, earthquake drills and stuff. For Mercedes, the one thing that really had an advantage for doing drills is when they were affected by the Japan earthquake, because that was in 2011, if I'm not mistaken. Many of them panicked. A lot of people really didn't know what to do. So afterwards, after gaining this types of trainings for community-based DRRM, many people really got interested in what they'll be doing in the actual situation. So that's my answer for that question. Then for the other question is, how do you gain trust from the local community in Philippines? Do you have some local partners such as local NGOs or grassroots initiatives? Do you involve schools in your action? Yes, for the first, yes, we do gain trust from local community. Of course, we do community organizing. We follow the community-based disaster risk reduction management approach, and it has a cycle. So you go into the community first, do risk assessment. So it's really a lot of processes that we go through. It's painstaking, like what I've said, but yes, we have to do it because we all know that the frontliners during disasters are the people from the community. We do have local partners, and not only from NGOs and from the government, but especially with grassroots, from the grassroots sector. We do the approach that what we call, it's called bibingka. Bibingka is a local confection here in the Philippines. And the way you cook it, you put fire above and under the bread. So it's like dealing with people above, with people from the government, and then, of course, also still dealing with people from the community. We try our best to connect both ends so that activities for DRR will be met. And yes, we are involved in many schools. We also have what we call a child-centered DRM that we are doing right now with some other partners. So thank you for that question.
It's a great question, Anne, in terms of, are there any cases where combination of structural approaches and others have demonstrably reduced vulnerability? The classic one which comes to mind is the Netherlands, that a good proportion of their main cities and of the country is below sea level, so they have built very large structural defenses, but nonetheless kept up flood awareness and many mitigation and flood risk reduction measures. The problem is that there is one test which counts. That test is a major flood, and it's often afterwards that the true extent of vulnerability or lack thereof becomes apparent. So we can hope that the Netherlands does remain a good case study, and we will see, whatever happens, a good proportion of vulnerability having been reduced despite extensive use of structural defenses. Now, this question from Leandro, what were the challenges in combining local and scientific knowledge? A lot of it comes down to many of the aspects which Nikki has discussed, and fundamentally, trust. Do people trust each other? Do they accept different forms of knowledge even when they do not understand it? And how do we overcome these barriers? And the way that it was done, the way this challenge was in effect overcome, was by external people spending time in the communities, living and working as people in the communities do, and just getting to know each other on the community's own terms. It doesn't mean the challenge was fully overcome, because there's always going to be different opinions, there's always going to be contrasting views, but it does mean that simply respect, trust, and acceptance, even without understanding, can help to move forward to say, yes, okay, I don't really understand what you're saying, but I can accept it and I can integrate it into what I'm doing this way, and then you can do the same. So again, so much of disaster risk reduction, including climate change adaptation, is really about working together, accepting the different viewpoints, and trying to find constructive ways forward. The challenges will never be defeated, they will never end because it's a continual process, but simply through trust, respect, trying our best to understand, and being flexible can help to overcome these major issues and move forward with constructive action.
For those
Dr. Kelman answered that question perfectly.
Thanks to both Nikki and Ilan for those great answers and for their presentations in general. And thanks to all the audience who braved the technical difficulties to come in. I just want to point before I switch to the last slide that my email on this slide is incorrect. There's a 1 before the @ sign. This whole presentation will be available online, so you can find some of those links, and hopefully you looked and saw the links in the chat box. So here are some resources that are available. Disaster Ready, more on this. There's the online e-learning course, which is the course I mentioned at the very beginning. That's the top link there. There is I'm going to try to use the arrow here. There's the second link is the book that we referred to before that you could download. And this bottom link is a webinar done with Amy Hillebo previously about how the book came about and some of the principles in the book. So feel free to access those resources. They're all at disasterready.org. And thanks to everyone. If you have more questions, you saw our emails there, and you're welcome to email us.
And thank you also to everyone, and especially the hosts of this webinar.
And thanks especially to Nikki, who stayed up in the middle of the night.
Thank you so much, everyone. And yeah, Godspeed.
And I just want, this is Bob, I just want to remind you, we have an upcoming webinar in April, on April 23rd, on budgeting for security, and you can see the participants that are there. This will be an excellent coaching webinar series, and we do this periodically, and so if you participate and you decide to continue, there will be actually a follow-up optional webinar along with some community activities that you can participate in with the subject matter experts and with your peers on Disaster Ready on the topic of how to budget for security and how to get that into your organization's protocols and procedures. So we invite you definitely to register for that, and that's available on disasterready.com right now. And finally, stay connected with us. You can see our social media options at the bottom there with Twitter and Facebook and on YouTube. And if you have any interest or desire as an organization or as an individual to partner with Disaster Ready on content development or curating content from other organizations, we'd love for you to contact us at partner@disasterready.org. And I'll just repeat what Ann said, and thank you again for your patience during the technical glitches. And as both Ann and Anna have mentioned previously, this recording will also be available within 72 hours on disasterready.org. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful day.